A formal farewell ceremony. This is an unprecedented ceremony. The Soviet troops stationed here in Magdeburg, the 3rd Strike Army, was considered the spearhead of Soviet forces. It was this army that captured Berlin, and these forces were considered to be the troops that would lead Soviet forces into Western Germany in case of a war. Now, they have all left Magdeburg. The 3rd Strike Army has returned to the Soviet Union. The Minister-President of the new German state of Saxony-Anhalt and other speakers at the ceremony pointed out that such an event was only made possible by the democratic revolution in the Soviet Union and Soviet cooperation in the unification of Germany. The Soviet soldiers now going home were told their historic mission, which started in the war against Nazism, was now coming to an end. But a new relationship, that of peaceful, good neighbors, had already started between the Soviets and the Germans. Many of the local citizens who watched the Soviet military march in their city for the last time were non-committal. But a few, especially old comrades in arms, were saddened by the occasion.
Вот, воевал, да? Вот, вам счастья, здоровья.
German army sources say there are now about 220,000 Soviet troops still in eastern Germany. All are scheduled to be gone by 1994. In Magdeburg, Gary Bautell, AFN News.
The dollar continued to sag on European money markets Friday with the dollar down. Here's a look at the rates.
This Kaserne at Wildpark West near Potsdam was once the headquarters for Hermann Goering's Luftwaffe during World War II. After the war, the new German Democratic Republic made its army headquarters here as well. Today, the Bundeswehr has set up its territorial commands east at this same Kaserne, commands which are responsible for absorbing the old NVA and eliminating a massive stockpile of weaponry. When the Nationale Volksarmee, or NVA, was headquartered here, this was a high-security area. The guard towers are no longer in use, and the atmosphere is typical of the citizen soldier Bundeswehr Army. When the new West German Army commanders took over, they were unsure how the soldiers and NCOs of the NVA would react to the dramatic change from communist to democratic leadership.
We had no resistance, not even silent resistance. We had a tremendous amount of solidarity with the officers and officials coming from the West to execute leadership and command.
One of the major tasks facing the Bundeswehr is getting rid of one of the largest weapons and military equipment arsenals in the world, with 1.5 million firearms alone.
We were bewildered by the masses of material, spare parts, vehicles, weaponry, which we had to take into custody. The reason is twofold. First of all, the National People's Army had to take over military equipment of all kinds from other military or paramilitary organizations of the totally militarized German Democratic Republic.
General von Schaven says commercial firms have taken over the task of melting the East German swords into plowshares. Much of the weaponry and ammunition is being destroyed. When possible, other military equipment is sold or donated. In Potsdam, Gary Bautell, AFN News.
Tomorrow night, Gary will look at how the destruction of the equipment from the former East German Army is being carried out. Well, as the German Army reorganizes, the drawdown of American forces in Europe is continuing. The drawdown is affecting all U.S. forces in Europe, and the Chief of Staff of the Air Force has some news concerning USAFE. General Merrill McPeak says that one of the changes on the horizon will mean less assignments on this side of the Atlantic.
The Air Force, indeed all U.S. forces in Europe, will be sharply downsized, in my judgment. We may end up on the order of half or so the size of the Air Force deployment presently in Europe. That means that a lot more assignments will be CONUS assignments, so people can expect to spend a bigger fraction of their career in the continental United States. Not just in Europe, but we're also going to downsize, I think, to a certain degree in the Pacific also.
General McPeak was also quick to add that despite the force reductions and the lessening threat of communism, NATO must still play an important role in the security of Europe.
This is a remarkably effective alliance, and we shouldn't forget it. We shouldn't be anxious to discard it. I mean, the Warsaw Pact has gone out of existence, the military arm of it, and I'm glad of that. I think that's appropriate, but I see no reason that NATO should declare victory and disband. I mean, there's plenty of uncertainty out there.
General McPeak made his comments during an interview with the Air Force European Broadcasting Squadron at Incirlik, Turkey. Well, since August, soldiers from the 8th Infantry Division's 3rd of the 77th Armor have been serving in Kuwait as the last combat unit deployed to the liberation of Kuwait's campaign. The 3rd of the 77th are back home in Germany this week after being welcomed home to Sullivan Barracks last week. Specialist Jack McCord has details on their return.
These buses have been a steady flow into Mannheim's Sullivan Barracks, returning the Pathfinder soldiers from Kuwait to their loved ones. 8 different battalions from throughout USUR took part in Operation Positive Force, with 1,000 soldiers assigned to the 377 Armor's task force.
We've done a lot of gunnery, we've done a lot of guarding, a lot of security missions and stuff like that. And it wasn't too bad toward the end, but it was a little bit dangerous at first, So it was a good mission.
Having successfully completed their mission, the soldiers are returning to Europe, bringing with them newfound respect.
Well, I think they have proven that the American soldier is as resourceful and innovative a soldier as there is in the world. These guys adapted to every challenge and truly excelled, so I have yet an even more pronounced respect for the abilities of the American soldier and his leaders.
Upon their return, the soldiers were met by their families brighter and more cheerful than when the soldiers departed over 3 months ago.
Oh, kind of sad, especially because of the girls' section. They're really daddy's girls. I knew it was going to be hard handling everything on my own, but I felt I was strong and I dealt with it before. I didn't really like the idea at all, but I know that's the way the Army is. There's nothing I could have done about it. But I dealt with it.
Okay. And how do you feel now?
Happy. It's so exciting. You can't wait to grab them.
After a quick debriefing, the soldiers were released to their families, who have their own way of saying welcome home.
What are you going to do, Paulette?
Hug them and kiss them. Oh!
From the 8th Infantry Division's Public Affairs Office, Specialist Jack McCord, AFN News.
With troops continuing to return from service in the Gulf, the training of forces here in Europe has continued right along on schedule. Senior Airman Bill Schnoer reports on how that training for mid-air refueling crews will change next year, though.
For years, it's been a familiar scene. Tankers of the Strategic Air Command taking part in refueling missions around USAF. The planes have been part of SAC's European Tanker Task Force, a mission of the 306th Strategic Wing at RAF Mildenhall in the United Kingdom. But on January 1st, that will change. SAC will turn over its tanker assets to USAF. The transfer is expected to simplify the task force operation, since USAF crews have been maintaining the tankers all along. The only noticeable change will affect the tanker crews. Until now, crews would fly their tankers to Mildenhall on a TDY basis. When USAF takes over, most crews and their tankers in Europe will be permanently assigned.
Their job will be different on a day-to-day basis than the job that the TDY crews do, because now they're going to have some training requirements they'll have to get out of the way that typically those crews that are here now don't do that.
The tanker reorganization should add only about 100 Air Force members to Mildenhall's base population. That's because of the planned departure of the 10th Airborne Command and Control Squadron and elimination of the Silk Purse mission. Even though USAF will soon take command of the European Tanker Task Force, the task force mission will stay the same, to provide refueling support for U.S. and NATO aircraft throughout the theater. From RAF Mildenhall in the United Kingdom, this is Airman Bill Schnorr reporting.
Germany are reaching out to the rest of the world. Extending a helping hand, representatives of Frankfurt's Contact Club recently traveled to Leipzig.
Leipzig is the sister city of Frankfurt, and we have taken on the task of entering in cultural exchanges with sister cities that match the contact clubs in Germany.
I feel that having a contact club with the sister city of Leipzig would be beneficial to the entire country because it'll kind of like bond the reunification with the people, not just on paper.
Oh, in the last 20 years, we've hit maybe 5 million people. Most of those Germans, the Western Germans who were in the contact groups, came to begin with to practice their school English. Is still obtained. When it comes to the Eastern Germans coming in, this gives them the same opportunity that the Western Germans had 20 years ago.
Even before colonists were settling in the Americas, Leipzig University was a center of learning that drew students from all over Europe. Today in Leipzig, there are signs everywhere that the city is beginning to overcome the legacy of more than 60 years of repression. Reporting from Leipzig, this is Lee Ferguson, 5th Corps Public Affairs with TV5 for AFN News.
That's our report, everybody. George Michael is up next. Have a good one. Over the East German Army was the huge stockpile of military equipment. In our continuing series on the new Bundeswehr Command East, Gary Bautell takes us to an equipment assembly point.
This is one of 50 equipment assembly areas the Bundeswehr has set up throughout East Germany, where tons of arms, ammunition, and vehicles of the National Volksarmee, or NVA, were readied for either destruction or resale. Most of the weaponry and ammunition has already been disposed of in the 13 months since the Bundeswehr took over, but hundreds of trucks and other vehicles remain.
We have to dispose of hundreds of trucks, ammunition, which is given away already. We have no ammunition here, and millions of spare parts, I would say, little ones, big ones, so it's several thousand tons have to be disposed of, have been disposed of, and some tons are left for the winter.
The soldiers assigned to this concern are, for the most part, former members of the NVA and have mixed feelings about disposing of the equipment which they trained on and maintained. But they will soon be getting new Bundeswehr standard equipment to replace the old Warsaw Pact-built vehicles. And this base will become a new supply center for the Bundeswehr's Eastern Command. Getting the job done is a real challenge. Where once 300 soldiers were assigned, now only half as many face a much bigger job.
We have not enough personnel which is trained to do the jobs here, which is quite normal. The NVA people were not accustomed to this kind of job. We have a great lack of draftees. Only 50%, 40-50% are here right now because all this builds up very slowly.
Many of these vehicles were stored here. In the case of war, the East German Army used this as a kind of a Pomke site, a storage site. Now they're stored here looking for new buyers or perhaps eventually to be junked. In Darmsdorf, Gary Bautell, AFN News.
The return of soldiers from Task Force Victory is continuing. Army Sergeant Chuck Kenny reports on the homecoming of 3rd Infantry Division soldiers from Charlie Company, 10th Engineers, and a Stinger platoon from 4th Battalion, 3rd Air Defense Artillery.
Over 100 days ago, soldiers from 3rd Infantry Division deployed to Kuwait to destroy ammunition dumps, tanks, mines, and to provide security. Charlie Company, 10th Engineer Battalion, and a Stinger platoon from 4th Battalion, 3rd Air Defense Artillery, recently returned to the waiting arms of family and friends. These soldiers can now relax as they prepare for the Christmas and New Year holiday season.
Sitting at home, watching TV, and doing some Christmas shopping, and just kind of enjoying my family.
Company C, 10th Engineers, and the Stinger platoon was part of Task Force Victory Forward, sent to rebuild a Kuwaiti Army camp heavily bombed during the Iraqi occupation, and to provide air defense security. These soldiers are proud of the hard work and the many improvements they made for the local inhabitants in Kuwait. In Kitskin, Army Sergeant Chuck Kenny, 3rd Infantry Division, Public Affairs Office, AFN News.
The dollar remains steady on European money markets Tuesday, and the exchange rate as far as the Deutschmark is concerned remains unchanged, as the dollar was only off slightly. Here's a look at the current rates.